Howdy, and welcome to the show. For 99 episodes, Cooper's Code has provided legal practice pointers and interviewed notable figures in law. I'm Zach Morvant, co-producer of Cooper's Code, creative copywriter, and Miles' stunt double. For our 100th episode, we wanted to do something special. From talking to our guests and viewers, one clear theme emerged. You want more Miles. So while acknowledging the irony that you're hearing a Costco brand version of him right now, I'll get right to it. Today, I'll be interviewing Miles using questions provided from several of our previous guests. So sit back, take a deep, mindful yogic breath, and join me as we explore the man, the myth, the lawyer, Miles Cooper. Thank you for joining us today, Miles.
It's really nice to be here.
Our first question comes from Bobby Shukla. She asks, is there a seminal moment or experience in your childhood that shaped the person you have become? I know we started with a hard one.
There is. When I was growing up in Salt Lake City, which was a very outdoorsy city to grow up in, one of the gifts I got from my mom was a 10-speed bike. It was a black Bianchi. And I'd ridden a bike before, but having a bike with gears gave me a range that I did not have before. And I had parents who also trusted me to expand my limits. So I rode to school, I rode to friends' houses, I rode some of the canyons around Salt Lake City and really started to learn that I could expand my world on two wheels.
That is very cool, and makes me think that is how we met was through bicycles over 13 years ago.
Yeah.
So it comes back to bikes. I love it. Another question from Bobby. What is something about you that people would be very surprised to learn? And she used all caps with very.
I think for those who only see me in a professional setting, they probably don't understand the depth at which I have really come to embrace my family. And by that I mean the work that we tend to do is all-consuming. And it has been a real challenge for me to shift focus to still be 100% lawyer and have that passion and joy that having children really involve.
I would imagine as a relatively new father myself, I don't have quite the same all-consuming mode that you enter when I've seen you in trial prep mode. Kind of everything seems to melt away around you, and you enter this very focused world. But I would imagine that the presence of something equally as important and involving as family must provide a very nice or essential even sort of counterbalance.
It absolutely does. And it's also a reminder that we don't do the work just for the work. We do the work so that we can live.
One more from Bobby. Is it true I was your favorite guest of all time? Top 3, okay. Top 100?
I think a broader answer to this is also on the same theme as children, which is I don't love any child more than another child, and I don't love any guest any more than another guest. Each one has been fantastic in what they have brought in terms of their shares, their wisdom, and their overall outlook. And Bobby was one of those.
Bobby, if you're listening out there, I want you to hear that you are valid, and we appreciate you. You're very special. I want to move on to some questions from one Thomas J. Brandy. He asks, how does representing families that have lost spouses and children impact your ability to be a husband and father?
The question causes me to choke up a bit. And I think that it's had different effects. At one point when I was working with Cynthia, just after we had our first child, there was a case that involved a little girl who had been positionally asphyxiated in a trundle bed. And I found that a case that I would have had no problem working on before, I actually asked if I could not work on that case. Since that time, I've found that I can work on harder things like that, and that the empathy that I bring from having my own family, having come very close to loss ourselves, I feel makes me a better lawyer, better able to tell people's stories.
I was going to ask about the probe on the empathy part a bit. It seems that initially it was a challenge to be a family man as well as a hard-charging trial lawyer, and now you've reached a certain point in the arc where now it's become a strength.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that when the children are that young, and there was a shift at that time, that particular case was just so hard because you could so see yourself just making the same choices those parents did and having such a tragic outcome.
That sounds difficult. I couldn't imagine trying to shoulder that burden while being the parent of a newborn. I'm going to move on to some questions from Rich Schoenberger. How do you use your wonderful voice, actually, as a weapon in prosecuting cases inside and outside the courtroom?
People are given all sorts of different gifts, and it's wise to lean into whatever the gift is that one has. Some people are tall, some people are super smart, some people are super hardworking. I had the gift of having a good voice, and the ways I've learned to use that are to slow down in terms of my speaking and the ways in which I ask questions. I also find that sometimes I'm better on phone than video or in person in terms of using my voice and timbre. I also know that with slowing down and being focused, I can command a courtroom with my voice in a way that people who don't have that same gift have to work harder to do. And so it's a nice tool to have.
I want to touch on something that you mentioned, which is I think that you said when you are on the phone that you feel that your voice has more power. Can you explain that a bit more?
What I've found is I can open doors on the phone far easier than in person or video. And by open doors, I mean I can modulate my voice, I can ask the right questions, I can pause in the right ways, and I find I can get different outcomes than others. Sometimes will be brought into, we're having an issue with this particular thing, would you mind calling so-and-so? And I've found that phone is one of the best uses for my voice.
Do you think that's because then everything else is sort of stripped away? There are none of the physical in-person distractions or visual distractions one deals with on Zoom, sort of the self-consciousness one has, for example, when seeing your own image on a screen?
I think that's part of it. And I think also when people see you, they have a different takeaway. A common experience I have is when I'm asked about being a bike lawyer, people will then see the bicycle and say, oh, you mean a bicycle lawyer? That would not have been my guess. So with my look, I sometimes have to purposefully soften that look in terms of how I come across. And with phone, that's not an issue.
Oh, biker bar.
Exactly.
Next question from Rich. What moments inspired you most in hearing from such a wide array of folks? And just some context for folks who may be listening. I believe Rich is referring to over the course of the now 100 episodes that Miles has done. He's interviewed several people and heard so many great stories.
One of the more inspiring interviews I did was Jim Brosnahan, both doing the work beforehand in terms of reading his book and then the material that Jim covered. And the tasks he took on and the willingness to commit himself 100%, even to some of the most difficult causes, people who were reviled, for example, and his willingness to step into the fray was truly awe-inspiring. It made me think that, if he's almost 90, I think at this point, that if I've got another 40 years of practice, if I could just do a few of the things that he has done, it would be amazing.
I recall being similarly inspired by him. This was very early in the podcast's lifespan. I believe it was maybe a month or two into recording, and my legal knowledge was very, very small at the time. Now I could basically pass the bar, no problem, obviously. But I recall meeting Jim and you telling me about giving me kind of a 10,000-foot view of his career and some of the milestones he had achieved and the people he'd represented. And I felt like I was in a room with a living legend, and it was very cool. Definitely an experience I'll never forget.
And definitely the kind of personalities that we're going to need going forward as we look at interesting terrain politically.
And I think we'll have some questions about that shortly.
Yes. Darkness on a sunny day.
Next up is Lori Naklis, family law expert. She asks, do you agree that your sitting for an interview provides an opportunity for people to look behind the curtain?
I do agree. And I think that's part of why we put the questions out to people who had actually been in the hot seat, so that our listeners would be able to get a little bit better sense of who I am and why we do this.
The next question is from Sharad Milanfar, friend of the podcast. When is Miles going to let one of us interview him? I think it would be a fascinating and insightful interview. And I'm going to have to jump in and say, sorry, Sharad, I think I may have taken your job on this one. But if you want to follow up with Miles and see if he'll let you grill him on a separate occasion.
It's interesting. I find on occasion, and I feel Sharad was one of the guests who did this a little bit, there are people who like to turn the interview process a little bit and start putting me into the fray a bit more. I recognize, one of my inspirations for the podcast is Tim Ferriss. I really like his interview style, and he sometimes will interrupt himself and say apologies for my TED Talk, because he'll have very long questions. I have a tendency to have very long questions. And so sometimes I am doing my own self-interview as I do the process.
Does that mean we're going to have Tim Ferriss on the podcast one of these days?
I would be honored if he would be on the show. I find him absolutely fascinating. I find his style very interesting. It's part of why I have that similar format, the deep dive format that we've done.
Tim, if you're listening, this is your invitation. Miles has a very busy trial calendar, so you'd want to reach out sooner than later. I'm going to move on now to Jeffrey Brand. He asks, has Trump's assault on the rule of law changed the nature of the podcast, its focus, its goals?
Judge Brand's question is timely and important. And I was somewhere recently where there was a piece of art. It was in neon, and it said, "And then they came for me." And I bring that up. I had to look up the quote. I know it, but I couldn't name the individual. Martin Niemöller, who was a pastor in Germany, whose quote, full quote, is, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak up because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak up because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up for me." I don't know where the podcast is going to go. We've been having some discussions about possibly changing the format and altering how we do things just to change things up, keep it interesting. I also recognize that now is a time when good people are going to need to come forward and do things. And if we don't, then the direction of this country could be permanently altered. So it's an important question. I don't have a precise answer. And I appreciate Judge Brand for bringing it up.
Yes, thank you, Judge. That poem and paraphrasings of it are really, really popular meme fodder right now. One particular I'll share that I saw was someone said, "First they came for trans people, and I spoke up because I read the rest of the fucking poem."
Yeah, well, that's a good way of putting it. There is one thing that I will add to the bit about the podcast and direction, and that is I am a student of podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I love listening to podcasts about podcasts. And name-checking Tim Ferriss again, one of the common elements when you listen to podcasters is the first 100 podcasts are the test ones. Meaning, once you get 100 under your belt, you're starting to reach the point where you're starting to know what you're doing. And I think we've had some marvelous content in our first 100. I also know that if those are our wax on, wax off, then we certainly have some amazing places we can be going.
I agree. Well said. I can tell you've been doing this for a while. I'm going to move on to a question from Krista Metzel. I would ask Miles if he could interview one individual, dead or alive. Who would he want to interview?
I would probably want to interview Joseph Campbell. My first answer was going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi, which, obviously dead, alive, or not actual was not the question. For those who don't know, Joseph Campbell was the author of The Hero with 1,000 Faces and The Power of Myth. Hugely inspirational for George Lucas and Star Wars. And Star Wars was hugely inspirational for me. The idea of the Force and the Jedi and those who can, standing alone, fight darkness is part of why I am who I am and chose the path that I did.
That's a very good answer. Ed Lazarus has the next question. My question is, what stands out to Miles as the most significant lessons he has learned from doing Cooper's Code? Lessons about practicing law, not about podcasting.
I think the most interesting through line in doing this is how many different ways there are to do this well. When you look at all of the amazing people who have been on the podcast, there's no single way that people came to the law or practice law. And it's really inspiring to recognize that you can come to this, you can see greats, you can even pick mentors, and still figure out how you're going to best wear your clothes, wear your outfit, carry your lightsaber, to join the previous question, and be the best warrior for your clients possible.
Next up, from Cynthia McGuinn. What non-law activities are a part of your daily activities?
I find that my best days are days where I spend time outdoors working hard before I get on with my day. So whether that be walking up to the top of Buena Vista Park, or climbing on a bike and going across the bridge, or doing yoga, or doing weights, something that gets my blood going and gets me breathing outdoor air is something that really brings me joy.
And how do they contribute to or enhance the quality of your practice?
By getting time outdoors and by getting time where I am not in my head, meaning not looking at email, not worrying about what thing needs to be done, it gives me an opportunity to truly refresh and to inhale, exhale, and blow out the dead air and move forward.
There's certainly something to be said. I think this is a concept you're familiar with about letting the subconscious do the work by not consciously thinking about a problem, for example.
Definitely. And that actually is something that I've been reflecting on more and more. I know that I am at my best when I'm in flow, meaning when I am fighting the stream, I have to get something done, and I force myself to work when I am not in a mode to do it. It is far easier, even if it's to set it aside for 5 minutes and walk around the block, than it is to just keep forcing and forcing and forcing.
There's a power to rest and to breaks.
Yeah.
What are the benefits and challenges to practicing with your spouse?
The benefits are really numerous. The ability to know someone very, very well, to be able to be present with them in terms of being able to work through issues. And what I mean by that, if something comes up, I don't need to track someone down or set up a meeting or gather a partner meeting. It usually is something where I walk upstairs and we're able to address the issue. The greatest challenge we should put our children on the podcast. And what I mean by that is when you have two people who are relentless, and the core values for our firm include relentless, and they come from who we are. We are driven human beings. It's hard for us to put it on park. And sometimes the first time we've had to really engage with each other during the day is at dinner time. And what ends up happening is we end up downloading about work during dinner. And so the real downside is when do you turn it off? When do you focus on the family?
How often do you shave your head?
I ideally shave every 3 to 4 days. It's easier that way. Doing it every day is, I think, lovely in terms of just the super clean look, but I just don't have the time or energy to do that. I trend lazy when I know that I'm not going to be on camera or talking to people. I also will sometimes not shave for effect. And what I mean by that is when I'm a little bit fuzzy, I am less intimidating looking. And so if I'm going to be picking a jury, I might want to soften things a little bit so that I'm a little bit more approachable.
Go for more of a teddy bear appearance.
Exactly. I was listening to Bill Burr recently, and his comment about, after about 3 days, you look like a retired shoe salesman who didn't get the gold watch. And that's like, yeah, that's how I look most of the time.
Moving on, questions from one Rosalind Whitney. She had many questions, all of them good, so I'm just going to let it rip.
She knows me very well.
Why did you decide to do a podcast? Has it met your expectations? Do you see continuing it? And if so, what are your future goals for the podcast?
I started the podcast for a variety of reasons. I have gotten better at trusting my instincts, and my instincts told me that a podcast was something that was going to be a very good tool for capturing and getting across some of the things that I want to do. I also was leaning into one of the gifts that I have, which is my voice. The ultimate goal was to help preserve the wisdom of the greats so that others, younger lawyers, who may not have the same access to mentoring that some have an easy way to just click on a podcast and boom, I now know what Cynthia McGuinn knows. Boom, I now know what Rich Schoenberger knows. Boom, I now know what Jim Brosnahan knows. So I think that the goal of capturing that wisdom has been done very, very well. I think one of the challenges and one of the reasons why I'm evaluating how we're doing what we're doing and whether we'll continue to do it in that same fashion is I don't want to be repetitive. And I started feeling more recently that the long format interview process was starting to feel a little repetitive in its own way. And so I definitely plan on continuing the podcast, and I expect that listeners will see some shifts as we try and just spice things up with a change here or there, this 100th episode being a good example.
Next question from Rosalind. So far in your life's journey, what has been the biggest surprise, biggest disappointment, and biggest learning lesson?
My biggest surprise was just how much having children would change me and make me, I think, a better person. I historically was driven and somewhat selfish. I am an alcoholic. Prior to having kids, I was a drinker. I drank for a couple years after they were born. And having others to focus on, I think, really altered my view of the world. And I think that's been a real gift. The biggest disappointment is interesting. And here's why I say that. some people know, maybe not everyone, that this was not my first career choice. I enlisted in the Navy after being at Berkeley. I did so because I really wanted to be a Navy SEAL, and I thought I had what it would take. I still think I had what it would take. My eyesight, as far as the Navy was concerned, told a different story. So when I qualified for BUDS and was about to be shipped off, they did a secondary eye screening, and I found myself out on my ass. That was a huge disappointment. I don't think I ever really got over it. I also think that if I had followed that path, I probably would not have had kids. I probably would have had a lot more challenges as far as my mental health is concerned. The people who do that work do very, very, very hard things. So as far as the biggest challenge is going to be holding it together, answering this question. Our family's ability to go through childhood cancer with Dylan was one of our most terrifying and ultimate challenges. She was just shy of her third birthday when she was diagnosed. We were in the ICU for 5 weeks at Stanford, which gave me a whole new insight into what some of our clients go through. To illustrate that, a parent stays with the child typically the entire time. And, every 6 to 12 hours, you're hearing a helicopter land and you're seeing a kid come in. And the only reason that kid is still alive is because they're attached to machines. And some of those kids don't make it. And you hear those too. You hear the codes. And you see the kids getting taken out. We had a 1 in 3 survival chance. And for someone who is always kind of focused on the future, what's happening next, not what's happening now, the year of focusing on being in the moment, that we could only control what was going on right then and there and keeping our daughter alive. That was the biggest challenge we've ever taken on. And we have the good fortune that our child, Dylan, survived. She's 11 now. She's thriving. And it strengthened our family rather than weakened it. But it was a monumental challenge.
Thank you for sharing that, Miles. I've seen you tell that story in varying forms over the years, and I know it doesn't, I can visibly see it does not get easier to go back there to relive it.
I didn't actively tear on that one, and I was able to deliver it, even if I delivered it haltingly. That's a lot of work with Ross.
She asks next, where do you see the legal field going? Would you advise people, your kids, for example, to take up the craft or career of law? Why or why not?
I think that anyone who is looking at a white-collar job right now has a very challenging decision to make. The impact of AI, I think, cannot be underestimated. I know that in the space of the last 6 months, what we as a firm are able to do with the assistance of AI and how that has lightened our load as lawyers has been huge. So I think lawyering will still continue. I think some of the more mundane elements of it will not be done in the same way. I think writing is going to be very different as a craft. I think that face-to-face work, being in trial, being in a courtroom and arguing a motion, those are going to continue in similar ways. But the need for lawyers, I think, overall is going to reduce. And how is that going to impact the white-collar workforce? Because what's going to happen to lawyers is also going to happen to many other fields as well. So,
Hey, look, we have a visitor.
this is Cato.
Hey, Cato.
And
Would you like to be a guest on the podcast? Can you say hi? Not interested. I don't think I could afford his rate anyway.
to the extent that Boone, Calloway, or Dave Helbron, you are listening, Cato has decided to pop by while we're recording. Always a welcome visitor.
Next question from Rosalind. If you had a magic wand, what would you change about the legal profession and about yourself as a lawyer?
I think one of the greatest challenges lawyers have overall is that empathy piece. And I think that we are trained well to fight for our clients. And I think that there is very little training provided on what it means to listen to our clients and have empathy for the other side. Because just because they're the other side does not mean one needs to be vicious. So lots of people talk about the challenges and the lack of civility. I think that our Zoom environment, our lack of face-to-face environment has increased the rudeness, the inhumanity that we have. And if I could change one thing with a magic wand, that would be what I would change. With myself, I also recognize that I have a tendency to be lawyer first, human second. The correction that I've found and that I am faster and faster in deploying is when I have a conversation with a client, I will oftentimes find myself going straight into lawyer, and then about 5 minutes in, I will recognize, I'm sorry, I didn't even ask how you're doing today, and once you start recognizing your human element, the more you can bring that forward, the better you are going to be in terms of practicing the craft.
What are your present time top 3 core values? And have they changed over the last few years?
My personal core values are wisdom, challenge, and growth. And I know I was only asked for 3, but what I have added over time is a 4th, and that is joy. Because without bringing joy to the equation, it is simply just marching forward. They have not changed over time.
I like that last one. That's something I've found to be very true. Without joy, what's the point? What is the hardest and easiest thing you have to do at work?
I'm writing right now my monthly column on the hardest thing. I think one of the hardest things to do is to deliver difficult news. That's another thing that I don't think law schools or law firms typically train people for. So when you've put a bunch of investigation into a case, you've got somebody who's catastrophically injured, and you reach the conclusion that there is no viable path. There is no way that we can win this. Being able to say that in a heartfelt and meaningful way where somebody hears it and also feels heard is one of the hardest things that you can do.
What is the hardest thing you've had to learn to be successful at home, work, and in life in general?
It is an ongoing lesson. I am a problem solver by wiring, and I am constantly ruminating on problems and how I'm going to fix problems and things that are coming up. That runs contrary to being in the moment. And I think I am best when I'm in a flow state and I am present and I am in the moment. And it is my yoga. It is my challenge.
Rosalind notes from the most recent issue of the Cooper's Counsel newsletter that you are using AI. What are the best and worst case scenarios for the legal field with regards to AI?
Best case scenario for the legal field is we embrace AI and we use it for the things that are more day to day. We use it, and I'm going to sound like an advertisement when I say this, but I think there's a reason good copywriters are paid very well. Anthropic, their tagline for Claude is a jetpack for your brain. And so if one uses AI as a ability to get 80% of the way there on certain activities that are less interesting, and also give you ideas, a springboard, creativity to expand, I think that's fantastic. I think one of the challenges is that humans tend to be lazy. And so if you have a tool that can get you 80% of the way there, and 80% of the way there, it's pretty close. I think there may be a tendency for people to use it as a tool to get 80% of the way there and have that be enough. Not really do much more than to, make sure it's not got some sort of a hallucination in there and then just submit something. As opposed to stepping back, evaluating what the product is. Is that really enough? Is that creative enough? What other things can we do with this? And so those who use AI to simply replace lawyering, period, run the risk of really making our profession worthless.
And it's an interesting point when you say getting something 80% of the way there, because in a field where judgment is subjective, it feels as though the ability of AI to accelerate getting to a certain point can have implications for taste level and for critical thinking and reasoning going forward.
Yes. And one of the things that I jokingly said to someone at some point recently was, we'll have our AI check in with your AI. Where if you're using AI to create your moving papers and they're using their AI to create the opposition, and the judge is using AI to evaluate the two papers to see which one has more merit, at a certain point, let's just take the human out of there and we'll just all throw it into an algorithm and here's the fact pattern of the case and, it's worth $4.33. So there's a risk and the potential for a slippery slope on things like this. Using it as a tool, great. Using it as an algorithm for all things, we're in the matrix.
And then it's the dead internet theory come to life, where all the content is being written by AI and only being read by AI.
That's what my AI tells me.
Over the next few critical years and beyond, with regards to the U.S., are you pessimistic or optimistic, and why?
It is a time where I am glad that there are Second Amendment rights. I'll leave it at that.
I like it. What core message from deep inside your soul would you want to leave your audience with on this anniversary of your 100th podcast?
Learn to listen to your limbic system, which is a fancy way of trusting your instincts. It took me a long time to recognize that your gut instinct, it's there for a reason. It's kept you alive for a long time. It has been well honed. We are very good at using logic and reason to shout it down. So the more you are able to incorporate your instincts in your decision making, the more likely you are to reach right conclusion.
What makes life worth living and brings a smile to your face? What could we do for you in the future that would make your life and the lives of the people in your world better?
Being able to go outside in a beautiful place with the people that one loves. That is what makes life worth living. How do we do that? The nice thing is, when you're fortunate enough to live in a place like San Francisco and have your family right near you, it can be done any day without much challenge. In terms of making it easier for a more global perspective, seeing the current decimation of the National Park Service has just been horrible. And I know that there are people who are taking action as far as that's concerned. We need to make sure that we have beautiful places for people so that they can continue to enjoy them. We are stewards of the land, and we should enjoy that.
If you were told that you would be passing away tomorrow, this is your memento mori right here, is there anything that you would regret not having done, seen, or said to someone?
I don't use as many emotions as I should with the people I care for deeply. And my belief is that the people who know me know how I feel about them. And I should be better about expressing my emotions, how much I love those around me, my friends, my family, my community.
Your neighbor's cat.
Cato apparently feels similarly.
I love a surprise special guest. Well, those are all the questions from our previous guests. Thank you very much for everyone who submitted something. We appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness. I'm going to move on to the lightning round. So answer as quickly as you can. Use your limbic system, your gut, if you will. And let's let her rip. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Zoom or in person?
In person.
Spicy or mild?
Spicy.
Night owl or morning lark?
Morning lark.
Taco or burrito?
Burrito.
Rim brakes or disc brakes?
Disc brakes.
Beach vacation or mountain retreat?
Mountain retreat.
Music or silence?
Silence.
Book or movie?
Book.
Childhood hero?
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Biggest motivator?
Being the change.
And the last one I think we all know the answer to. Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
That concludes the lightning round. Miles, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And I'm going to put you on the spot and have you do the outro. Would you maybe mind sharing a message with the folks listening?
I'd love to. First of all, I want to thank everyone who took the time to write in with a question. It was really fun to be able to go through that exercise. I also want to thank everyone who has been a guest on the show. The opportunity to sit down and learn, gather wisdom, and be with some amazing people has been a real honor. I also want to thank all the listeners. It's really fun to do this. And if I was solely doing it to an empty room, I don't know that I would continue to do so. So for those who choose to listen and choose to share the episodes, I really, really appreciate it. So I think the only other thing I can say from that is to all of you doing justice out there, happy hunting.
Please email us at podcast@Cooperstown.law with questions, comments, feedback, and suggestions for who we should have on the show. Like what you heard? Share us with a colleague and leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice.